Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. And today I want to show you guys how to install Ubuntu MATE 16.04 on your Raspberry Pi 2 or your Raspberry Pi 3. Now, I'm using a Raspberry Pi 3, and in this tutorial, I will show you how to install Ubuntu MATE. I will show you how to expand your file system, and I will also show you how to overclock your Raspberry Pi 3. Now, a lot of people are complaining that Ubuntu MATE is too slow. It's too slow. It's because you're using a class 4 card. I mean, basically, that's what it is. In my opinion, I've used Ubuntu MATE for the Raspberry Pi 2 for as long as it's been out, and I've been using it on the Raspberry Pi 3. I love the operating system. Well, in my opinion, it is the best operating system for the Raspberry Pi 3 or the Raspberry Pi 2. And with a little bit of overclocking on the Pi 3, this operating system flies. Let's get into it. I'm using a 16 gigabyte class 10 Samsung Evo SD card. Now, it's not the fastest SD card out there. If you get a they make a lot faster SD cards, and it will be very beneficial to use the fastest SD card that you can get. This was just a cheap SD card that I picked up. It's free on Space now. I'm not using it on any other builds, so I'm going to use it. Let's get into this right now. First thing you're going to need is the Ubuntu MATE image, and you can download that at ubuntumate.org. All the links for everything that I show you here today will be in the description. Click on your download. I'm going to scroll down here till I see this big, beautiful Raspberry Pi logo. And this build just came out as of making this 4 days ago, and it is really smooth. This has the option built in to expand your file system without having to go into your terminal and do anything. You click a button and your file system is expanded and you're ready to use. With that said, the Raspberry Pi 3 also has working Wi-Fi and Bluetooth with this build. I'm going to download, and now this is a torrent link. If you do not use torrents or you do not know how, I suggest you pause the video, open up a browser, and Google how to torrent. I use uTorrent or BitTorrent. Those are my clients that I use to download torrents with. Very simple. You click on the link. It's going to bring you download a torrent file. You'll click on your torrent. It will start in your torrent client, and it will download for you. So I'm using BitTorrent now. uTorrent is also very well. When you're installing your torrent client, just read the install carefully, because they do try to trick you on installing some other crap that you don't need. Next, we're going to need Win32 Disk Imager. Now, this is the go-to application for flashing any images to your SD card to use with your Raspberry Pi or any other single board computer. This is a trusted download. This is at SourceForge. And this week alone, there are 84,000 downloads. You don't have to worry about any malware or viruses. This is totally safe. You can download here. It downloads and you install it. It's very quick, ready to go. It will set up a desktop icon that you can start from there. Next thing I suggest you get is SD card formatter. Now, what this does is after you install an image to your Raspberry Pi SD card, if you ever want to use that SD card for anything else, let's say you want to put it back in your cell phone, digital camera, or just flash another OS onto the card for your Raspberry Pi, you will need to format the card with SD card formatter. Now, SD card formatter is good for cards up to 32 gigabytes. If you have a card that is bigger than 32 gigabytes, you are going to need to download FAT32 format. This application is free, no viruses. He made this solely for us to use. I mean, this is an amazing guy who made this here. This is really good that he did this, because all of the new SD cards that are 64 gigabyte or bigger, you cannot format them to FAT32 using your stock Windows formatter. You will have to use this application. I have already downloaded Ubuntu MATE 16.04, and I've placed it in a folder on my desktop. Now it comes as a zipped file. You need to extract it. So right click, just extract to its own folder here. This could take a second depending on the speed of your computer and hard drive. Bear with it, it will finish. I'm going to fast forward this. We have fully extracted our Ubuntu MATE image. We're going to click on the folder we extracted it to. It is 7.8 gigabytes large now. So this is a disk image file. We need to use our Win32 disk imager software to flash this to our SD card. I'm going to open Win32 disk imager now. So this is easy software to use. You want to make sure that your device here is your SD card. If you have anything plugged in to your PC, just make sure that this is the correct drive letter for your SD card. And you can do that by opening up your File Explorer. Over here on the side, SD card. Mine is F. So I'm correct on my device here. You just want to be safe that you're not flashing this to something important like a USB drive or possibly a hard drive. Now the blue folder here, we click on this. We're going to navigate to the folder we extracted our Ubuntu MATE to. You want to load the disk image file. You can either double click or highlight and click open. We are ready to flash the image to the SD card. Now this is a 7 gigabyte file. This will take a while. It could take as long as 10 minutes to flash this. This is a 7.7 gigabyte file being flashed to an SD card. Now this will all depend on the speed of your card and the speed of your SD card reader. It will finish, just let it go. I'm going to click right. It will warn me that it could corrupt my SD card. That's why we have SD card formatter or your GUI format that I showed you guys earlier. It's in the description below. Click yes. Now while this is installing to the SD card, I am going to fast forward it. The SD card was flashed successfully. Now what we're going to do is take our SD card from the computer, place it into our Raspberry Pi. I also have a wireless keyboard and mouse combo hooked up to my Raspberry Pi 3. And we need a HDMI cord and our power cable. We will be ready to go. We're going to move to the Pi now for the first boot of Ubuntu MATE. This is the first boot of Ubuntu MATE on our Raspberry Pi. we will be guided through some steps that we need to set up our OS with, but it's very simple. Just follow the on-screen prompts and you should have no problem. One thing I always do is log in automatically. It will now finish the install. This could take a bit depending on the speed of your SD card. Setup is complete. We're almost ready to use our Ubuntu MATE. First thing we need to do after the initial setup is expand our file system. We want to keep this welcome screen open here. Don't click skip. It will move us into the main menu. So in order to expand our file system, we'll just click on Raspberry Pi information. And right here, we have the option to resize our file system with one click, which is really awesome because about a month ago, we did not have this option. We had to go into the terminal, type in a bunch of lines of command, and resize our file system manually. This will resize it automatically for us. Now, resizing your file system is very important. If you go to your home folder, right-click, Properties, we'll see that we only have 4 gigabytes of free space. And that's just not enough. When we expand our file system by clicking here, what this does is it deletes all the unnecessary stuff that has been installed, and it will open up our SD card so we can use as much of the SD card as we possibly can, minus the part with the operating system on it. So now that you've clicked the resize file system, click reboot one time. We'll restart Ubuntu MATE. Ubuntu MATE is resized and it's ready to use. You can check that your SD card was resized properly by going to your home folder, right-click, Properties, and now instead of 4 gigabytes, we have 11.8 gigabytes free. Now remember, I am on a 16 gigabyte SD card. The rest of the space is used by the OS itself. You can configure your Bluetooth up in the top right-hand corner. Same with your Wi-Fi, as long as you're on a Raspberry Pi 3 or have a compatible Wi-Fi adapter in your Raspberry Pi 2. Now I'm going to show you guys how to overclock. We can overclock from the terminal, but the easiest way to do this is to shut down Ubuntu MATE, take your SD card out of the Raspberry Pi, place it back into your SD card reader on your computer, and we will go into the config text file. We'll add a few lines and we can overclock. Now, I have tested several overclocks. I have a heatsink on my CPU for my Raspberry Pi 3. I suggest before you overclock, order a heatsink. Some of them come with a sticky pad. I actually made my own heatsink out of an old heatsink off of a NVIDIA 8400 GS video card. I cut it so it's a bigger heatsink and I have it zip tied. I don't care about how it looks. I actually like it. I have it zip tied crossways through the mounting holes on the Raspberry Pi 3. And it's a bigger heatsink and it just works great. I also put a few layers of tape around the CPU so I don't touch any of the other electronics with the aluminum heatsink. This thing gets hot when it's overclocked using Ubuntu MATE. There's a lot going on in this operating system, and overclocking is well worth it. So we're going to move to the PC now. So properly shut down Ubuntu MATE. And when this shuts down, we'll be right back at the PC and I'll show you how to overclock. I am going to show you how to overclock your Raspberry Pi 3 running Ubuntu MATE now. Before we get started here, I have to warn you guys that this is probably going to void the warranty on your Raspberry Pi. This is probably going to shorten the life of your Raspberry Pi. I am not responsible for any damage caused by using this tutorial to overclock your Raspberry Pi. I'm not responsible for any fires caused by your little tiny Raspberry Pi board bursting into flames or blowing up. I am not responsible for any bodily injury caused by overclocking your Raspberry Pi using this tutorial. Now, with that said, I have a heatsink on my Raspberry Pi, and I definitely recommend you put a heatsink on your Raspberry Pi CPU. If you're using Ethernet, also get a heatsink for your Ethernet chip on your Raspberry Pi. Now, I have created a text file for everybody to use. Now, this is a few settings that I have found that work pretty well. I've been able to run mine at 1.4 gigahertz. I did crash while I was doing some heavy load online using Ubuntu MATE. So I went back to 1350 and I have been stable the whole time. And I did not mean to bring the core frequency to 500. So when you download this, it will be at 450. So I use 1.35 gigahertz. I have my overvoltage set at 6, my temp limit at 80, and my core frequency at 450 megahertz. This will be available in the description. It will be uploaded to my Dropbox. You may download it and use it if you'd like, or you can just copy them from watching the video and add these to the config file. So in here, I have a 1.4 gigahertz, 1.35 gigahertz, a 1.3 gigahertz, and for you extreme overclockers, I have a 1.5 gigahertz overclock setting. Now, I have not been able to run at 1.5 gigahertz. I've tried my hardest, but there's nothing I can do. My Pi 3 just is not capable of doing it. Now, I have seen online that some people have a better chip, just like overclocking your Intel CPUs. Some people get lucky and get a really nicely built chip, and you can overclock to 1.5 gigahertz, possibly higher. But for this tutorial here, I am doing a 1.35 gigahertz overclock. Now that is only bringing the CPU up 150 megahertz. I have overclocked the GPU to 450 megahertz, and this does make a difference. I have had really great speed increases using Ubuntu MATE with my Raspberry Pi 3, and I enjoy using it while it's overclocked. So this will be in Dropbox, uploaded to my Dropbox in the description for you. Place your SD card that you flashed your Ubuntu MATE image to into your SD card reader. We're going to navigate. It should be named Pi Boot now. When we flashed it and installed Ubuntu MATE, it renamed the SD card to Pi_boot. Open this up. We're going to scroll here till we find Config. Right click. I recommend using Notepad++. If you'd like to use the stock Notepad, good luck, because this is going to be all garbled. Download Notepad++. I'll have the link in the description. It's free, easy to use, and it is one of the best line editing software for Windows that you can get. So I'm going to open it in Notepad++. Now we're reading through here. We got all this garbage junk. Oh, junk. Just scroll down to the bottom. We just want to go ahead and overclock. Let's not even worry about it. Now you bought a $35 computer and you're worried about avoiding the warranty. I'd say don't worry about it. It's a $35 computer. I'm going to navigate to my text file that I created for you guys. I'm just going to snap it to the side, snap my config text that's located on my SD card that has Ubuntu MATE installed. I'm just going to copy. Now this will be different here, guys. I did have a problem. This will all be fixed when you download this text file. So you want to copy hashtag overclock settings all the way down to core frequency equals 450. Copy. Go down one line under the last line on the config text and just paste this in. Overclock settings, ARM frequency 1350, overvoltage 6, temp limit is set to 80 now. Core underscore frequency is equal to 450 megahertz. File. Save. Close out of all this junk. We are going to put the SD card back in the Raspberry Pi and boot it up. Do not worry, guys. If it doesn't boot for you, if you used a high overclock, all you have to do is delete the line that you just put in there, and you will be back at stock speeds. I'm going to go back to the Raspberry Pi now and show you that we are overclocked to 1.35 gigahertz. You should now be booted back to your Ubuntu MATE. You now have an overclocked Raspberry Pi 3 running Ubuntu MATE 16.04. Now you might ask, how do you know it's overclocked for sure? We can find that out by going to Applications, System Tools, MATE Terminal. And I'm just going to find the max frequency of my CPU by typing in cat space / SYS for system, devices / system / CPU / CPU 0, which is core 1, / CPU FREQ for CPU frequency / scaling underscore max underscore FREQ, and press enter. And right there you can see that the max CPU speed is now 1.3 gigahertz. So yeah, we are definitely overclocked. I have been running stable for a long time with the new 16.04 on 1.35 gigahertz, and it has run amazing. We do have working Wi-Fi and working Bluetooth, so this is a really great build. Big step forward, and it does run a lot better on the Raspberry Pi 3 than it did on the Raspberry Pi 2. I've had no troubles at all. Like I said, just make sure you have a nice, fast SD card, a good power supply. It'll supply enough juice to your Raspberry Pi 3. And if you'd like, use the overclock tutorial. All the links that were used today in this video are in the description. If you guys have any questions, comments, or requests, let me know in the comment section below or send me a private message. If you could, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe because I have a lot more coming. Like always, guys, thanks for watching.